Okay. Call the meeting to order.
I'm gonna see if I can find one. Actually, I probably won't have Wi-Fi, so.
Does anybody need one of these?
No.
This is like a funky.
All right. So our first order of business is to approve the minutes from August 20th. Everybody have a chance to read those? Very lucky to have our own minute taker here. Did a very thorough job. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes of August 20th? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Anybody abstain? Jennifer Champagne abstains. Oh, actually, we probably should have motions.
So did you have a motion to approve it or a second?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
That's a great idea.
August 20th.
I'll second that.
All right.
Okay.
And then, well, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Jennifer, Judy's here. All right, Alan has an update.
Okay, we have the schedule in front of you, the colored version 11 by 17. Not much has changed on it, except that we extended the process of the schematic design a couple more weeks because our estimators only need 2 weeks to do the schematic design estimate. So we had shortened up that little block there. We're scheduled to go into the estimators on October 2nd, right, Friday? Correct. And they're going to need 2 weeks, like I said, to do their estimates, and then we're going to get back together and do the reconciliation with them. But all the other dates are holding as far as going to the MSBA and submitting the schematic design submission. And with the votes, the town meeting and the vote for March 1st.
All right. All right, anything else?
No.
All right, good. Christian? Great.
Works great. So very quickly, we're going to go through MSBA update. There was a question from the last meeting about roof costs for the 2 different massing options. We want to go over that. A summary of meetings that we've just had in the last couple of weeks. And then before we submit all of this material to the cost estimator, go through the updated plans with you, as well as some of the materials that we're considering, as well as the massing and some of the exterior materials, and then finally the site plan review. Again, this is not to decide final finishes on, what exactly is going to go where, but to get a level of finish so that what we're submitting to the cost estimators meets your approval, and that we're all on board with that. And then, of course, once we get those cost estimates back, we can start adjusting things as we see fit going down the road, but that we're at least starting from a level that we're all in agreement on. So the MSBA update, this was part of their comments that they gave back to us when we submitted the preferred schematic report. They asked for an updated educational plan, updated floor plans, an updated site plan, and then because we had adjusted the floor plan, we gave them an updated space summary as well. And thank you kudos to Judy, who spent a lot of time and effort on the updated educational plan, and that whole package went into the MSBA on September 3rd, and we've heard nothing back, so no news is good news. To touch back on our last meeting, we had looked at some of the initial massing of the building. We had talked about one where it was just entirely a flat roof system, kind of reminiscent of what's happening at this building now at East Meadow, and one where we had some sloped roofs over the classrooms, allowing for some clear story windows up above to bring light deeper into the classroom. I'd hide some of our HVAC equipment behind that, and just gives it a little more interesting form to the building. We sent this information along with some ceiling plans and some of the structural, in broad brushstrokes, how the structural system would have to change between these 2 approaches. And Peter Bradley of PMC got back to us and he felt that it was a price difference on the order of $300,000, or about 1% of the overall construction costs to go with the sloped roofs as opposed to the flat roofs. So we wanted to bring that back. It sounded like last time there was a concern if that got up to somewhere around 5% of the construction costs, so we're well under that. But we wanted to bring those numbers back to you. So we've continued to develop that scheme that's on the top there.
The maintenance costs any cheaper for slope roof?
I think you could argue that fact. I mean, because you have a series of flat roofs on the existing buildings and slope roofs on the new, you're going to be dealing with both. But in general, we can put a standing seam metal roof on these sloped roofs, and that will come with a longer warranty period than you will on your flat roofs. Any other questions on this topic? We can come back to it as we start looking at some of the
MSBA logistics.
correct. So very quickly, we've had a lot of meetings over the last week, really, as the deadline comes for the submission to our cost estimators for the schematic design. It was difficult to schedule, but we were able to nail all of the department heads down. So we met with them on September 15th. That was with the fire department, the building commissioner, the police department, highway/DPW. I think that was it from the town side. And then Helen and I were there, and Alan was there, and our electrical engineer was there, and our landscape architect was there, and our mechanical engineer was there. And it was really a very, very helpful meeting. We'll go through that in a little bit of detail. Next slide. Planning board happened the next night, and Helen and Alan can...
Not much got mentioned. We just brought them up to speed as to what the current thinking is for the plan, and it was informal, so they just acknowledged the fact that we were before them, and they didn't see any issues come up from the plan that we presented.
Similarly, the next week was Conservation Commission. Rachel from Berkshire Design Group attended that. Again, it was just an informational meeting. We weren't applying for anything, but we just wanted them to be aware of the project. From Rachel, it sounded like they were appreciative that we were there, and that there is a new development that's happening to the north of the existing property. And so if we are going to locate our well to the north of this property, that Conservation Commission would like to look at those two developments hand in hand. Similarly, the Berkshire Design Group will evaluate what's happening there and make sure that doesn't have an impact on our well. It's not expected to, but they just want to make sure that they're considering both of those projects at the same time. And then on Wednesday, we spent a day meeting with teachers and staff, first up here at East Meadow and then down at West Street. It was a very long day. It was packed. We had basically hour sessions, first with special education, then with a group of 4th through 6th teachers, and then the art and music and library and etc. Finishing with administration at about 5 o'clock that evening. So we got a lot of input. It was great, both in terms of the layout of the rooms, and then also a lot of ideas on finishes and things of that nature, and I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. And then finally, we just want to mention that we have still pending, we'd still like to meet with Board of Health. And then the plumbing and electrical, we're not able to attend that department heads meeting, but we will reach out to them. Nothing critical, but we just want to make sure that if there's a Granby way of doing things, that we understand what that is, and that our consultants are on board as we develop the plans. So again, on the department heads meeting, some of the highlights. Clarifying snow removal, which is very helpful. There was a discussion of whether we could, with this project, irrigate some of the fields to the north of the high school. And frankly, that's outside of our scope and our budget, but that if we're bringing power and a new power up to the well, that maybe we can try and provide for a power source in those fields so that future irrigation is easier if the town of Granby decides to go that way. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as we go over the updated site plan. We've shifted around the parking a little bit just to preserve some of the access roads that the fire department helped clarify for us. The fire department asked for an 8-foot wide sidewalk. from the building access to the end of the fire lane so that they could get a small ambulance or a small truck down there. And our landscape architect was able to do that. We went over the location of the well and the fire training needs that happen at the north end of the site, make sure that those were not in conflict with each other. In talking to the fire department and our fire engineer, we're now leaning towards having a remote pump building, fire pump building that will be the fire tanks will be located under that building, and then the pump will be in that building, and then it will pump pressurized water to both the building and to the fire hydrants, for the sprinkler and for the hydrants. We were planning on doing some of that infrastructure within the building, but then we would have to excavate quite a ways for the tanks to feed Granby, and so this seemed like a better solution. Once we came to that conclusion, it seemed like a good place to maybe also locate a small 10 by 15 or so maintenance storage shed that might be attached to that structure. There are items like lawnmowers and snow blowers, anything gas fired can't be stored within the building. So helpful to start thinking about where those can be stored off-site or on the site. From the police department, we talked about this is school guard glass is a type of glass that's extremely abuse resistant. So he was requesting that we include that in our specifications at all front entry doors and large windows right next to those front entry doors. And that's something that we've done as a change order on some of our recent schools because of the increased awareness of this issue. So to plan for it now is helpful.
Wait, you don't do it on the 4 jut-ups?
We'll have a discussion on that. I think we're going to try to design our mullion pattern so that they're not quite the large panes of glass that we see in our renderings thus far. But for cost reasons, I think we're going to try and avoid not doing it at each of those areas. The police department did request that we have cameras in all the hallways of the school, in the library and the gym, kind of the larger spaces, the larger gathering areas, and the public areas. And then also on the exterior corners of the building so that they have a good view of the site. It sounds like there's already a system here where the police department can stream what's going on here, so we'll have a similar system for the new school.
Would it be possible to ask to look at a system that would allow for like iPad access? Because I worked in a district where that was possible, so that in the event of an emergency, you have an incident command somewhere, and you don't have access to a desktop, you could potentially dial in.
The police department said that they currently are able to bring up the camera feeds on their laptops. I don't know if there's if that goes down to an iPad level or if it requires more hardware than that it's able to provide, but sure.
But I mean, school sites are now up to the chief, kind of how the school site gets into that, because obviously, in the event of emergency, it's you're not all the same physical place.
Right. Mobile access. We talked a little bit about the building design, and the police department said that they prefer alcoves in hallways, so it's not just a straight hallway, that there are places to get some coverage. So that was interesting to hear from their perspective. Kind of an overarching message from all of the department heads was to try and simplify the lighting and HVAC systems as much as possible. And that's mostly somewhat based on the experience they've had at the new fire station and at the library. And it was good, it was helpful to have our engineers there because it's good for them to hear and it's good for us to hear. It's difficult it sounds strange, but it's difficult sometimes to simplify these systems, especially with some of the lead requirements and energy efficiency requirements. So I think that's going to be a fine line that we will try and walk, but nevertheless, it was good to hear that message. One issue they brought up was potentially extending the warranty of the building. Typically, a contractor has a 1-year warranty upon substantial completion. And they were wondering if in the specifications it might be worth it for the town to consider paying more for the construction costs, but extending the length of that warranty to 3 years, so that the contractor would have a longer period of time that they would be responsible to come back and help fix things like the lighting and HVAC system. I think that's something that's completely in the school building committee's hands on it. It's something that they want to entertain. I don't think that would be reimbursable by the MSBA, but it's something to consider if it's been an issue in the past, and it seems like that would be helpful.
It might actually be carried as an ad alternate. You have both prices, see what the price comes from each contract for that service. Then you make a determination.
What's the advantage of it? We're going to be getting extended warranties on mechanical equipment and materials and stuff. So what is the great advantage for expanding this? It's only going to get us labor, right?
Correct.
At contractor's rate of $80 or $90 an hour, right? So we're going to buy 2 years worth of someone's $80 an hour.
Right.
I
And
wonder if that's
their
what-
estimate on how much time that would involve. So
Interesting here, they say even Western is clear, yes, it's not anything to change the construction.
right.
So all they're going to do is buy insurance.
Right. Right.
Which we could do. Get a price for it, see. What's our expectations on something.
Christian, can you talk about the alcoves in the hallway again?
Yeah. Jump ahead to the floor plan a little bit. In our proposed hallway here, at first we had this as kind of a long straight shot, and we did have a larger alcove here for breakout space, but we were thinking about the entrance to the classrooms and that it's a little bit nicer if there's kind of an alcove when you're entering the classroom. That was purely from an architecture standpoint. It seemed like a nice gesture. But the police department saw that and really appreciated it and thought that he had a term for it that was
Almost like field of fire.
right,
That-
funnel of
Yeah.
fire, that if there's a shooter in the hallway and there's no place for kids to duck into, that it's a much more dangerous situation. And that if there's not a place for policemen to duck into, fatal funnel. Yeah.
We just use the terminology in school construction.
That was the first I
This is the 21st century.
Well, and it also does slow an active shooter down if you're going in trying to get doors versus just running down a straight hallway to flipping handles to see if somebody has something.
So,
Okay, thanks.
yeah. And then the bottom one is also a question for the school building committee is the size of the emergency generator. We discussed with them that the emergency generator will be diesel fueled, that it will power both the fire pump and the kind of bare minimum of emergency lighting and boiler and HVAC services at the school. But currently, as a generator size, it does not power the kitchen, for instance. It would not power the air conditioning, for instance, but it would power ventilation and emergency lighting. So if the town is interested in having the generator power more than that, we should get a feel for that so we can size the generator accordingly. Thoughts on that?
There's some merit in having the kitchen, so you don't lose any food or anything.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's powering to make sure that we get the coolers, but then there's also, do we want the kitchen to be operable? Are we going to be firing up equipment?
Because this will be transformed from a warming kitchen to a service kitchen.
The question is, are we going to use it as a shelter?
Well, that's the big thing. If
Yeah.
you're going to use it as a shelter versus using the high school as a shelter.
We don't need food.
There are a lot of ramifications of calling this a shelter
Oh, yeah.
and what has to go besides a larger emergency generator that I don't think you want to get into that because you definitely will not make it reimbursable and it'll get it'll get expensive. If you want to size it so you can't cook food there, that's your option. But to call it a shelter is not.
That's a whole other ball.
Right.
How much difference are we talking about as far as cost? What's the is there a factor to it, or?
I knew it affects the structural code, what we have to do structurally.
Oh, if it's a shelter.
If it's a shelter, yeah.
But if we want
No,
to
just-
Oh, just for the kitchen?
Just-
Oh, that's,
just the
that's
generator.
upsizing the generator.
I would guess on the magnitude of $100,000, $150,000.
How much is reimbursable? Is that-
Not for the upsizing of that. They, you might get away with it, I don't want to say get away with it, but if the engineer says the emergency generator has to be such and such a size, and he makes it a little bit larger, nobody's going to question him. He doubles the size of that, they're going to pick up on it pretty quickly that you don't need an emergency generator double that size, and they're going to ask for it there.
So, say for example, power work go down, we had kids here, we couldn't get them out, and we needed to go. How much bigger are we talking for a generator?
Well, we need to run that one by the estimators. And yeah, first we'd have to ask our engineers, okay, what is it? They're going to ask us, what is it you want to power that we're not powering for life safety? And when we tell them that, then they'll say, okay, you're going to need, X, kilowatts for
Right.
the emergency generator. And then we'll give that to our cost estimators and they'll put a price on it. But,
So the way I'm hearing what you presented, if we're going to have, if this current option is having minimal lighting, that leads me to believe that our primary intent is to evacuate and just make sure that everybody gets out of this building because we don't really have full services due to power outage, right?
It would be safe to stay here. The ventilation would still work. But the heating would still work at a bare minimum, so if it happens in February, you're not going to freeze. But
That
yes,
sounds fine.
it's not a place to bring people into.
But it's not a shelter, and we do have a shelter right there. So,
So going
So it
back
would
to
be
the
a case
question.
of then, if we had to, we would evacuate
Yeah.
this facility over there and just make provision for that, that's all. I'm just thinking if for whatever the reason is, weather or whatever, and you couldn't get the kids out of the building for some reason, buses can't run or whatever, and you gotta keep them here for a while, you gotta be able to feed them, that would be my concern.
I would think it'd be a cost analysis. What's the chance of that happening? It's never happened yet.
Oh, you worked in Belchertown in
No, here in
October,
Granby.
a few years ago. When we were out for a week, it was awful.
One of the questions would be, if that were a situation which actually occurred, what else would we call? Why wouldn't you just provide food and think through all the other things that would lead to the implication that you can't get kids out of the building? So that's a lot more. Probably comes close to being a shelter.
The only time we used the shelter was October 11th. Then in 2011, we had a snowstorm, and that was, we did have people use it, but it was sparsely used. It wasn't like
At the high school.
a, because we do have a generator that we and unless there is a specific reason and full conversations with the safety folks, the police department and fire department, I don't think we have any reason to switch the shelter designation from where it is today to the new structure. So we're probably good the way you guys designed it, unless there is any compelling reason for us to consider something else.
Well, I also think we're considering the slope roof at $300,000 additional. You have to pick and choose your additional, the money that you spend.
Great. So that's kind of a summary of the department heads meeting. Any questions from that?
You went by very fast, and nobody made any comment about the new cut off the highway?
That's straightly in the Mass DEP.
Nobody local said anything about that?
We specifically asked them, and they had no comment.
What a surprise.
I mean, they don't have any say in the highway anyway.
Yeah, but I just figured that would be a lot of discussion. I'm glad it wasn't.
They didn't seem concerned about it, but they seemed to like the overall flow of the site plan.
That's fine.
For the teacher and staff meetings that we had on Wednesday, this is just a quick example of a pre-K classroom. So we showed the teachers and staff plans along this level. This is probably a little bit more developed than what some of the other staff saw, but and then we had a long list that goes down through both finishes and then also furnishings and equipment, and just making sure that we're planning for what the staff would like in their new school. In this pre-K, we had one option here with the teaching wall up here. We had another option with the teaching wall over here. We had some different options for how the cubbies might lay out and where the sink in the classroom might go. We talked a lot about this shared space in between the classrooms, and it was very helpful to have those conversations. Some of the highlights, things that I took away. In general, we were surprised to hear that in general the staff wanted less carpet and more resilient flooring, that was an issue with cleanability and allergies and winter wear and smells and all of that. When we went through the shared spaces in more detail, it seemed like the teachers actually would prefer a slightly smaller space than what we had originally planned for. And we felt that way too, actually. As we started to look at it and place furniture in there, we started realizing that those were pretty large rooms that 10 people could fit inside. And did teachers see this as a 10-person room or as a 4 to 6 person room? And it sounded like more of a ladder. And that if we could give some of that square footage back to the classroom or for storage, which was the dominant theme of the day, more storage, please. That we should try and do so. So I think we will work on finessing that area a little bit. We talked to them about double doors. They have passageway doors between the classrooms at East Meadow right now. We talked about would there be a benefit of expanding those into double doors. The one group of teachers from East Meadow didn't think that seemed necessary. I think that's still a discussion to carry forward with the district and the principals, but it was interesting to hear that. As we went through all the SPED spaces in the building, at this point in the program we had developed a series of larger SPED spaces, 500 square foot SPED spaces, and a series of smaller 200, 300 square foot SPED spaces. And as we met with the SPED staff, we started to realize that some of those spaces will be owned by somebody, and some of those will be flexible, just open meeting rooms that will be used throughout the day. And so it was helpful to understand that we should start thinking about who is going to own what space and how do those rooms that are owned by teachers, how does that change what should happen in there as opposed to a more flexible environment. So a teacher desk should go in there and some storage, and if it's for speech, then maybe it needs to have a certain layout, whereas if it's for somebody else, that it might not need that exact same configuration. Looking at the admin wing, an isolation room was requested by the nurse that we might lose a cot. Right now we were showed 4 cots packed in there, and we might cut down to 3 cots, but be able to give her an isolation room, which would give her a little bit more flexibility, a little more privacy when needed. In talking about the admin wing, we talked about adding another office for a social worker. That we had a little bit too much space that was open for general office, and that having another little carved out office might be more beneficial. Just today, we got some input about changing tables in the pre-K and kindergarten classroom bathrooms, which was good to clarify. As I said, more storage was the dominant theme. We presented several classroom layouts, especially at the pre-K and kindergarten level. So talking with those teachers was really helpful in reading some of those options out and getting a clear direction from them. The teachers would like area rugs in every classroom, so even though we are going with a lot of resilient flooring, that we didn't know if that was just a pre-K through 2nd grade or if that would continue up. And it sounded like with morning meetings and kind of informal meetings that the area rugs were helpful. Dividing the occupational therapy and physical therapy room with a movable folding wall was a request and seemed like a great idea. looking at the music room / platform spaces. So we have two this one that's right here behind me will turn into a music room. There'll be a sliding door that can close that off. And then we had a similar idea at the stage in the new addition. And that seemed like a great idea at the very beginning and a really great way to cut costs and save square footage. I still think it's a good idea, but we're going to have to be very careful about providing adequate storage and how we and where we place that storage so that both of those spaces can be used for both of those functions. There was some trepidation about how successful of a music room will this be if it's set up just for a stage and vice versa. So it was helpful to kind of walk through some of that, which one will have instrument storage and which one won't. I think the instrument storage is going to go into the new edition, and the platform that's back here right now will be more of the elementary music classroom, typical. And then, we talked about the computer lab in the library, and that would be a pretty heavily used space, that it would be used by the librarian as part of the new media services, certainly, but that it might also be used at times for teachers in the building as well as special education teachers teaching a typing class, and that it might be helpful to have some kind of dividing wall between that computer space and not have it just open to the library, kind of as it is now at West Street. But here at East Meadow, they have a separate computer lab in a classroom, so kind of trying to combine both of those. So, any questions on?
I had a comment that was brought up by the PE teacher that was unable to make the meetings. He stopped by my office today, and he was just wanted to bring up the idea of, I know we talked about the noise from the music rooms and maybe the other spaces, but he also talked about the noise from the gym and how that might get carried into the offices that are the administrative offices, because it's very loud, the ceilings are really high, and it gets very echoey and extremely loud in there with the kids. So he just brought up that as an additional point. I wanted to carry that forward to you guys.
Great.
Sure. Give you a break?
Yeah.
So this is the plan. It's pretty similar to what you saw last month. I will say everything that Christian just described in terms of the comments we received yesterday have not been incorporated yet. So the next meeting we'll mull all of those comments over and bring back a somewhat revised plan with the assistance of the district principals, especially around who's going to be where and making sure we get all of that right. I think the only other change that might have occurred since we showed you the plan is we are indicating an area for potentially some bleachers that could pull out. That would be for stage performances, not for athletic activities. But it's something that we're again thinking about incorporating into plans.
If you repeat that, we didn't get it all.
What's that?
If you repeat that, we didn't get it all.
There's a, I don't want to call it an alcove, but an area that we are reserving for potentially bleachers, stacking bleachers, telescoping bleachers that could pull out and be used when the stage is in use.
So there would be no
Yep.
There's no room for basketball game to occur in there and parents to sit and watch.
It's tight. It's tight. That's, yeah, there's a very, oops, wrong way. There's a very narrow area around the striping. It's, again, this is the 6,000.
Narrow that people would stand.
They could stand, yeah.
I think we should really think about that. This is the only the second gym we have in our community. So,
Right.
I don't know the answers, but I think we should really think about that.
There was some discussion many months ago about that gym being and I think at least in my mind, it's the size of whatever the middle school is in South Hadley. Everybody know?
Yeah.
It's
But it'd be smaller, it sounds like this. So Hadley has about enough for 5 rows of bleachers.
Right,
on the
exactly.
side.
I think so.
I thought we voted once that we wanted this to be a high school court, which
It is a high school court.
95 feet.
It's a
We
high school
didn't make the
court.
building any bigger, we just made the court bigger than
Well,
95 feet.
right now, we are sticking with the MSBA guidelines, so if we want something different, I think that's a question of reimbursement. We exceed the size of the 6,000 square foot gym.
Well, let's not lose that one, because having a gym without a place to sit is non-functional. Regardless
It's
of how big
West
it is. It's a terrible setup.
Yeah, it's
West Street is much smaller. This is actually a full-size almost court.
It's almost double what West Street was. West Street was 3,000 square feet.
It's basically going to be the same spectator
Yeah, sitting in the
size
sun.
as West Street.
Do you happen to know when they put their guidelines together, were they assuming that floor would not be full-size high school?
Yeah, because it's an elementary school. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they're sizing this for elementary school, which it wouldn't be, you know,
Used as a community.
used as a community.
Or if it was, it would be used for some sort of league basketball for little kids.
No, it's sized for a high school court, but it's definitely not sized for seating. So it's just for PE use and community use as a basketball court for a community game at night, but not for spectators. It's the MSBA's view that if you're not, once you get up to middle school and high school, then the gym gets bigger to allow for that. But at this level, that's their thought process.
And it's not to say we can't make it bigger, but we're going to pay for it. And must be just not going to contribute to that extra square footage in there.
With the middle school, you'd be able to put in a bigger size?
I'd have to check on that.
Because this is a joint project.
Yeah, right.
This is a joint.
Right.
Pre-K
Well, this is,
through 46.
Still considered.
Right.
All is a renovation of the.
Sixth grade.
But it is a joint one. That's how it's been built, right? I know it's
Yes,
elementary.
but, right.
It is joint. It's how it was submitted. That's the approach we're taking.
Right.
Middle school uses.
Middle school, 7th and 8th
Yeah.
grade?
No,
No. But K through 6 is considered elementary.
Correct.
Yes, right.
So,
This is fine.
this is
Yeah.
right.
So if this is high school size, is there a regulation size for elementary school?
We did put in a smaller basketball court in another school. I think there is actually a standard middle school size court that's slightly smaller.
Do you know by how much? And I'm wondering because if the difference allows us to put some seating,
Right.
and we're not going to actually use this for high school level competition, then that might be one option.
I think, yeah, I mean, now is the time for us to know if we want to consider something other, because we need to submit to the estimator next week. So if we want something different than what we've been proceeding with up to now, now's the time.
What's the primary reason? For grade school?
Physical education.
That's our physical education.
This is a good time too to talk about the fact that this will be used for performances too, so it's, keep
Is,
that in the mix.
is there any option on sort of double blank? Right, so that for its primary use, and let's be big, but that, go back 6, right, so the use of this form, easily accommodate. But you could, if double striping is an option, this is confusing, then when it's used for the scoring for children's games, you'd have enough room. These people pull out bleachers, put chairs, so parents. And then back to whatever you use it for, whatever size basketball you can do something. Striping there. I don't know if that's.
you brought up a good point about it's also a performance space. So like there's sections of time during the course of the year that space will not be able to be used in the evenings because we have performances and we have rehearsals for those performances and they're used for school functions. I mean, when we have the concerts and things, that's where they're going to be held. And so that there's going to be chunks of time where it wouldn't be available to the community anyways because of where it's located with the stage.
Is there a problem currently with scheduling stuff in the high school gym?
We have a shortage of gym space.
Yeah, there's
in
only
town
one.
outside of school. We don't have practice space. We don't have in-town basketball space. It's in Fremont. That's the only gym in the community.
As far as I know, they're using, and I don't know this for sure, but I think they have like girls basketball practice from a certain time.
Yeah.
And then the boys come in and then middle school, so there's a lot of teams that are using that.
And GAA has used this gym here.
Yeah.
Yep.
They definitely have, but they wouldn't be able to use it in the new building when performances are going on.
And they use West Street constantly. They're always
Yeah.
there, all year.
And that's not a couple words.
No.
Well,
At West
is
Street, they're
is-
used to standing.
Is that an
around.
option? Is the option of double lining and allowing for some additional bleacher
I was
space?
just thinking about that. If we got the court is smaller in both dimensions, so I don't think we could double line it because of where that bleacher is located. Right? We could. I've not seen that before.
Just take a look at it too.
Well, I think what would be helpful to us is we were going to get to this question when we got to the flooring material anyway, but what are the priorities for this space? I mean, of course, everybody wants everything, right? This is your one shot to build this building, but obviously, as a multi-purpose space, is the priority on PE for the school? Is the priority on having a community gym? Is the priority on having a great performance space because you don't have an auditorium next door? I mean, help us with sort of ordering those things, and that'll help some of these decisions be made as we keep going forward.
Well, obviously, PE space, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the
That's
number
the
one use it's
priority.
going to get.
Yeah.
And then number 2 would be the stage, I would think, because it's in the school. The community would be nice. We don't want it, but
I agree with you only because I think of the stage as it's part of what we do in our curriculum, like it's part of our programs.
Right.
So, and that is one of our strengths in the school is this program, and so I would definitely agree with that.
And so therefore, when you have just kind of a wide open gym, what you do with that acoustically to make sure that when performances are happening, that sound is just not bouncing up to the rafters. And, people can't hear, that's what'll happen without some sort of baffling.
The other thing you can do here is that the stage area, if you're using this for a basketball game, you can put chairs on the stage area, and that can be your bleacher area where the people sit and watch what's going on there. So you kind of flip the audience to up there rather than enlarge the space and have room for pull-out bleachers. I mean, it's only on one side.
As long as there's storage up there, because remember that's going to be someone's classroom.
Yes.
That's where that's someone's classroom as well.
Right, I mean, but those doors will open, and there can be a group of people, maybe not the maximum that you'd like to have there, but that's how I've seen these setups work.
All our skybox suits, charge a premium.
Well, I think the third, so I agree the priorities are what you stated, phys ed and then stage.
huge.
I think the 2 throw-ins, and they're nice throw-ins, and that is when we do town meetings, would this be the place that we do town meetings? If you have a stage, you might have better acoustics than the high school gym. I don't know the answer to that, but part of me says it would make sense to use it. And then the 4th would be an additional basketball court. Maybe we're asking too much of the space.
Right. I mean, you could certainly, I'm thinking in terms of practices, say, for teams, drills, can be done in a smaller gym, you don't necessarily need a full regulation gym at all times to do skill building with kids. You have someone have access to hoop and a couple hoops and you can still play, 3-on-3 or whatever you need to do some drilling with kids. Without having the full-size court available. But yeah, for town meeting,
I would say for town meeting, we'd stay at the high school because of there's more seats, there's the bleachers that can't come out. So when you have a meeting that's packed for whatever reason, you'd have more room for more people.
We also have our sound system wired.
Right. So I can't see moving town meeting here, well, at least every town meeting.
I actually hope that we can, because the acoustic is pretty bad. The TV, whenever you try to watch it, you can't.
I agree.
You can't
It's
hear
technical.
most stuff.
You can't hear anything.
If this is especially going to remain the size it is, which is similar to that, I hope that we can find a way to design it so that we can have town meetings here.
Yeah, I think, every 10 years you have a big town meeting, right? And you're gonna have 600 or 700 people, but for the most part, they're 100 people, so. Maybe Emery's idea of just looking at, the middle school size gym is the way to go with having some bleachers.
Yeah, I just
That's all
found-
reimbursable.
thanks to the power of portable technology, some specs on youth basketball versus what they call junior high basketball courts. The court length and width is the same, 74 feet and 42 feet wide.
So right now we have an 84-foot long and 50-foot wide, which is the highest size.
So if you were to go with the youth size, the court length would be, and this is the same for what they call junior high, 74 feet long, 52 feet wide. A rim height of 8 to 10 feet if you're talking about littler than middle school, 10 feet in middle school. Center circle diameter of 12 feet. 3-point line is none for youth, 19.9 inches for middle school. Key width, 12 feet for both. And then free throw line of about 15 to 15 feet.
That's not
So
that far off.
it's fairly smaller, these specs are definitely smaller than high school size.
But is that going to gain us enough room for bleachers? It's only 8 feet.
I wouldn't say bleachers, but it would give you like 2 rows of benches.
Benches or chairs.
That might be enough, just to have somewhere.
And I gotta tell you, bleachers are maintenance nightmare.
Is that the size that would be utilized by like GAA currently?
Yeah,
That's the size they're currently using, so that would be,
yeah, I'm sure they can make that work.
Yeah, because they play on the high school side.
Well, there's a lot of younger teams too, though.
Yeah.
Smaller.
Which a high school size gym is way too big for them.
Yeah.
Right, they use the one at West Street, the GA mostly.
And
Well,
then
the young kids,
And
yeah.
say high school.
But
Yeah.
6, 7, 8.
Well, I don't know what St. High, they used to use it, I think it was a full
It's
size,
full
right?
court.
Say high school.
4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 year olds.
Kids in
Yeah.
4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Well, that's the specs that was right. They're smaller than high school.
They're going to be limited to 40 kids right now. You're not going to get fire
So you
marshal.
can fit one for chair.
You're not going to get the 6, 7. It's 7 standing and 15 for seating. So 6,000 square feet. It's cool. It's only going to allow you.
Oh, yeah, this is one.
How many people in this house?
400. It's 15 and the 6,000 square foot, it's 15 square feet per person in chairs. And if they're standing, it's 7 square feet per person.
Seminary. Issue.
Yeah, it's 20 years ago. Last school.
Did you get more seating if you put the markings on one side of the floor and on the other side a little more? So we only have 5 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other? Go beyond the 3 rows?
Yeah, be a little more efficient.
Will they be provisioned for a sound system?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And acoustics and everything else.
Okay.
I think we can decide later on the gym size, what we definitely need to know is if we want to go bigger than the 6,000 square feet.
Right.
I guess it's kind of hard if we don't have a cost attached to that. I mean, fully knowing that it's not reimbursable.
Figure around $375 a square foot for any additional square footage that you're looking at.
We went 100 feet by 10 feet, 1,000 square feet.
Yep.
Rough numbers.
Say that again?
And none of it is
Louder.
reimbursable.
About $375, excuse me, a square foot. So if we were to do something 100 feet by 10 feet, let's say, probably $375,000. Non-reimbursable.
Right, but that's maybe more important than a slope roof and lighting.
The slope roof is only half that.
Yeah.
Well, the slope roof is going to affect the education of students every day.
Every day,
Yep.
all day. Yep.
So I would argue that
Because
there's
of the
a
lighting, yes.
Hiding the mechanical equipment and the building contractors.
I just think the
The
players
end
are
result
like,
is we're spending more money. You know, we spent $600,000 tonight. We're approaching spending $1 million before we leave this room tonight. Right?
Well, the question is, would that extra, I hate to say it, but does the extra spend capture more votes?
or does it turn more votes away?
Yeah, right. Right, exactly.
Sorry, I mean, snarky, but.
Through a wet blanket.
That's what happens when you have
I just
someone
rather,
just taking on your
like I
finger
said,
all
I'd
day.
just rather see a full-size court with less spectator, spectator than we have. I think that's not good. Then we're separate. You know, it'd be great to have bleachers and stuff, but I don't see that. I don't see spending $375,000.
Well, and with the option of using the stage for at least a few seats.
Craig is like,
This is what the
You
stage
see what,
usually
this
looks
is
like.
what it's gonna look like, and that's my $7,000 of personal equipment that's unsecure every day in the
Yeah.
schools. Stuff was
So-
stolen last year.
Stage is not gonna work.
Appreciated that out.
Stage is not gonna work for seating.
Why is there a priority to have a full-size basketball court in the elementary school anyway? Why?
I mean, my thought, I wouldn't say it's a priority. I don't really feel like I had that much.
So why not have, it's elementary school, elementary size court in an elementary size school?
I just think people will use a full-size court more.
But the people that use that court are young. And I know from West Street, it is very uncomfortable to go watch your kids play basketball, as you know. So why create that situation again? When we know how uncomfortable it is. And the priority is the elementary students, not full-size basketball court, which we have over there in the high school where it belongs. I don't agree that it needs to be a full-size court.
Well, I think that's where we're at this point. I think originally, I will tell you what I was saying, because it's not just me, but I've heard other people say the thing, if you're going to build a school, build a full-size court so we can get, because we've lost St. Hyacinth's, but the reality is now that we're down to this, we may not be able to pull it off.
Right.
But if we are going to have a court, then we've got to have bleachers, not just have it, whatever.
Or some form
we've got to have
of,
some
some
sort of
form
bleachers.
of seating, yeah.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't think we should count on the stage.
I mean, you can see this is what the stage is going to look like. I mean, it's not,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Plus some instrument audio.
Right.
In wings.
Actually, that's a good point. Is this what the stage is going to look like?
Instrument audio.
Minus
In
the
terms
steps,
of-
not the
In
steps
terms
size.
of height and...
No,
No.
it'll be higher, about 40 inches from the gym floor to the stage floor, so that we can fit some storage underneath for folding chairs that can roll out underneath. It's going to have a dividing wall, and there you go. You see it here. So the idea is that actually that this dividing wall happens about 4 feet back from the edge of the stage, so that there is a little bit of stage that's accessible without going into the music room space. That just provides some flexibility in that somebody can come out, if you're giving a presentation or a talk, you can do that with the door still closed. You could even have some people, sitting on the edge of that stage as a seat while the basketball game's going on. But then that folding door would open and tuck away back here, and then you have access to the full stage. This is showing a wall. It wouldn't be really a wall. It would just be, that would be the curtains, and that would help define the stage space and the storage behind it. But this is our opening now of our stage here. So the opening width is a little bit wider, and then it's a much deeper space than what you see at the.
So where are we? Are we arriving at a smaller size gym, which is 74 by 42? Is that?
Or court, not
Just
court.
the
Room,
court.
but
Right.
court,
Right.
not the room, but the court.
Right.
But I think what you guys said is not critical that we make that decision tonight. We wanted to know the uses for the gym space, and I think it's primarily gym space, and the secondary purpose would be performances. Is that?
I think with the smaller court size, that does open up some more room around. And then, if this is if this is a folding bleacher that's tucked up against this wall for storage, that's quite large, that can come out to see quite a few people for either town meeting or a stage performance. What having that smaller court and having maybe some rows of 2 or 3 benches here just allows us for more flexibility for seating in general, I would think. That you could use those benches that could be on casters and use those as for seating for some of those events as well. So I think it does offer a little bit more space to have more flexibility for different uses.
I think especially for gatherings like the town meeting, bleachers would not, I'm speculating now, but at least, bleachers would not be as useful as floor seating. Think about senior citizens coming, they're not going to want to climb the bleachers to go up there.
Right.
And also you are blocking the view angles because you're putting the bleachers, you're extending them, so you're basically limiting however many people you can squeeze to the outside corners.
Well, I didn't hear you say bleachers, I heard you say benches.
Oh, is it?
Well, if those could be on the side, right, then you could use those in conjunction with the bleachers and in conjunction with pull-out seating that's stored under the stage. You could use those 3 elements together to
All right, so
provide some more.
at this point, it doesn't matter because we're keeping the size of that space the same.
That's the
Right now, seeking the big what goes in it, but
I think we can bring back some layouts showing, smaller striping shifted with seating so that you get a sense of what we've done.
Great.
It's a wood floor, right?
That's coming up.
Don't jump ahead.
On this?
And it's fair to say that the gym size, my guess is that can be used up until, say, the 8th grade, for official games, and then after that, we only have the high school. So I think that's not so bad.
And if, say, the girls' basketball team needed to practice or something was
that would
going on
work.
at the high school, granted, it's not a full-size gym, or vice versa, but at least it's enough to do drills, and it's enough to do some, geometry or whatever.
Girls may say that boys should come here.
Well, no, I said or vice versa. So, girls may be playing a game over there, boys may need to come here and again, you just modify what the practice is about.
So this is a good segue. This is just a plan showing public access. This is something that we will include in our submission to the next submission for schematic design for the SBA. And just indicating how the building could be, I don't want to say locked down, that has a different meaning, but shut down to allow uses of certain spaces. So the pink color, peachy color is the cafeteria, the platform, the library. These are existing doors that are here right now. We can lock. People could come in through our secondary entrance to use those spaces, and then of course to use the gym we'd be using, you could decide which doorways to use, but the yellow color would be how we would shut off the rest of the school for the use of that space. Now we're moving on to floor finishes. It was based on the input that Christian and our colleague Lawson obtained from staff and teachers yesterday. Was definitely a preference for a resilient flooring. We've specified linoleum very successfully over the years. I think that would be our first choice. We have some stuff we can start to pass around, touch, feel. So anything that's not shaded here would be a resilient finish. Probably linoleum. We're also thinking about rubber. It doesn't off-gas in the same way that rubber products in the past did. Linoleum is a renewable product that is made from linseed oil, and it performs very, very nicely in school settings. We have a limited amount of carpet. Again, in schools, we go with carpet tile because if you do have small areas that require replacement, that can be done easily. So right now, carpet tile is being thought of solely for the Library Media Center and the administrative area, with the exception of the nurse's office, of course. I'm going to skip the gym for a second. We'd like to consider the use of epoxy terrazzo for our main lobby. Incredibly durable material, 100-year material. It is a little more expensive than porcelain tiles, or a lot more expensive than linoleum, but we feel that this is, the front living room, the main entry of the building, and it'd be worth spending a bit more money on floor finish here.
Any special plan?
Easy. It's open water. In fact, everything that we're proposing is soap and water, no wax. That is another nice advantage of linoleum. VCT, which we're on right now, requires waxing. Linoleum does not. And then the green shaded areas would be some kind of ceramic tile, or in the case of the renovated kitchen would be quarry tile. And then that brings us, we do have some, the brown areas, we would have entry systems, so the aluminum grills with the carpet inset, and you need some walk-off carpet mats for 15 feet after the doorway, so you get all the grit off your shoes before you get into the rest of the school. And then we come to the gym and some of the conversations we've started having about floor finish. Ceramic, same, like soap and water. Exactly, yeah.
You want to talk about performance vinyl? This is a sample of a customer performance vinyl versus a normal, or traditional.
So for the gym, Christian and Lawson already heard some very strong opinions one way or the other. But we wanted to put both on the table. The reason being, this is going to be a multi-purpose space. It is, as we've all discussed, a gym first, but it will be used for performances. There will be a setup and put the chairs out, take the chairs back, out, in. That does tend to have a damaging effect on wood floors. You can protect a wood floor with special floor covering systems, but that's more time for your setup. So something to think about. If wood is preferred, we would strongly recommend that we specify something that will protect it. It does mean though that when you do the setup and the breakdown, there's a little extra time. Performance vinyl has gotten much better. It's pretty much the same cost nowadays as wood. It actually, some of the systems, they range in cost. Some of the higher end systems do have the same substructure of wood sleepers, so you definitely have the same shock absorption and the same support. But you would not have to protect it in the same way that you would a wood floor. So let us know your thoughts. It's a hot topic.
High school. The high school, does the high school have anything on it other than
Oh, that? I would think so.
sneakers except for town meetings and?
That is
Yeah.
simply.
Yeah, so there are, yeah.
Very often? How's that wear compared to?
It's tough shape.
The high school, we talked to the maintenance folks, they said the high school is on its last possible sanding. And that when they have town meeting there, or when they have special events there, that you can tap the next day. And so that it is a concern.
Last Sandy, how many years have gone by?
Don't know.
You and I were probably just twinkling in the father's eye when we were down.
But it was me, 25.
A long time ago.
That's when I was born. 1964.
There's nothing wrong with the weather. There's enough finishes to be put on it these days. Extended life. Maintenance is not the same as it is at the high school. I think it would be ill-advised to rent with a solid wood floor in this gymnasium.
Okay, super. Unanimous. Thank you.
Right?
Tossing some easy ones every once in a while. Then moving up from the floors, and again, this is just to put some things out there. This is what we intend to put into the pricing set. But if there's something here that we need to discuss, we're happy to discuss it with you. So flooring, we've already discussed. Wall finishes. So obviously we're going to have new walls and we're going to have existing walls. Existing walls will repaint. They're CMU walls. They will continue to last you a very long time. In the new portion of the building, we are planning on gypsum wall board. We do like to incorporate some vinyl wall covering on the teaching wall. It's easy to wipe down, provides a slight texture. We have glazed brick here. You actually do have glazed brick in your corridors right now, so we are proposing selective use of some glazed brick in the new addition. We're not proposing this color, but this is what it looks like without sort of, I don't want to say an iron spot or a black fleck in the glazed brick that you have. I do want to say I don't think we're proposing to match that, but we're trying to keep the same quality. What's gypsum board?
Sheetrock.
In the areas where we would have new walls, we're calling them the node areas, so where the corridors open up a bit, here in the existing part of the building, we will be constructing a new wall, so those would be metal stud framed with the gypsum wall board, plaster wall. And then on these walls, again, from a durability standpoint, we would propose a porcelain wall tile up to about 4 foot height, a wainscot height. Ground face block, we're proposing for gym walls, but I've already also touched on the fact that we'd probably take that up to about 12 foot height. On a couple of the walls, we use acoustic block, which are the slotted blocks. And then we will probably additionally need some fabric wall panels of a certain height. So again, we have to tune the space to meet all the needs of everything that's going to occur in there. Ceramic wall tile on all toilet room walls, fiberglass reinforced panels on janitor closet walls, some walls in the kitchen, again, easy to wash down. Ceiling finishes, we'd have a mix. We mostly have ACT is acoustic ceiling tile, so that's the stuff that's in grids that's suspended from the ceiling, allows you to run your mechanical and electrical above. We would have some exposed acoustic deck, so you'd actually be able to see the structure, and of course that would be in the addition. So if we run a reflected ceiling plan, but as we get into more detail, we can show you those areas. Exposed open web steel joists, again, that will be paired with the acoustic deck areas where we can expose the structure. It's kind of nice for kids, I think, to see how their building is going together. And then some selective use of wood beams. And again, this would be in the same area where we're proposing the epoxy terrazzo in the main lobby. So making that space, first space, warm, welcoming, higher level finishes. No. That's what the safety officer tells us now.
You're saying you're having open steel joists or open deck. Is that in the classrooms where the pitched roof is?
Correct.
Yes.
So with no acoustical tile on the platform.
It would be half and half. So it would kind of be a ceiling like this in a way, where that part back there would be exposed acoustic deck. You'd see your structure, and you'd have a band of clear story lights, or windows, where these lights are. And then this would be the dropped ACT, which connects to the hallway, so that we can run our utilities through the hallway and then come into the classroom, but leave that part nice and open, high ceilings, expose the structure.
Any thoughts about proposed finishes, bad experiences with anything, good experiences?
I worked in a school that had trials on those there, it was comfortable. Yeah. So for your main hallway, that's a great choice.
Go outside?
Yeah. So just a quick discussion on the exterior materials. As we mentioned earlier, for the sloped roof, a standing seam metal roof. At the flat roofs, a PVC membrane roof. Yeah, that's roof. That's equivalent to the new roof that you have on this building. For the existing walls, this is the existing brick at East Meadow. It's actually, or not down here, up here. And it's got a really nice variation to it. It's a really nice brick, actually. It's got nice texture to it. We got out a bunch of our brick samples and talked to some of our reps. And we found one KF brick that actually seems to match pretty closely. And so we would propose using this where there's unit ventilator holes that we're going to be covering up. And some other, repointing. And the brick's in pretty good shape, but there's a few areas where we'd probably replace some cracked brick. And so we would propose something like this for the infill in those areas.
Can I ask, is there an opportunity to clean the existing brick and seal it? Or would that be, it's not, I don't think it's incredibly expensive, but while we're at it.
Right. I would have to look at sealing it. I don't know about that part. Cleaning it for sure, we would recommend. But sealing it, we've run into problems before, especially sealing old brick, and then if you have moisture inside of it, that can create problems.
Be quicker.
So what do you want there, She feels like she's at home.
So for the new addition, basically the majority of the new addition, we would be proposing a new brick that relates to the existing brick but does not try to match it exactly. So we have this sample from Interstate Brick, which is one of our favorite suppliers. We're thinking something kind of in this range down here, so it relates to the existing red brick, and potentially at a Norman or Emperor size, so a little bit longer and thinner. So it shows that it's an addition. It's not the same as the existing school, but still related to it. For the gym walls, we were thinking about the gym being also a brick, but relating more towards the dark side of the accent brick of the existing school. So something down in this range. This ironstone brick, we have a sample palette of that as well. It has some nice variation to it. It has a nice texture to it. We've done it in a school in Adams very successfully. It really came out. Yeah, here, you guys want this one too?
Throw bricks at you. End the meeting quickly. Here you go.
So those are our primary materials on the addition, and then for the shared classroom, shared rooms bump out from the existing classroom or from the proposed classroom wing, and also for that line of clear story windows up high or above, and also for the connectors between the existing school and the proposed addition, that would be a metal siding to kind of differentiate between the two and something lighter to contrast with the brick. So that's again, a very durable material.
Metal panel or brick metal?
Corrugated metal. And so that was some of our thoughts on at this point, for a cost estimate, proposing those materials. We have been thinking about the gym brick in particular, and that on this wall, we'd like to incorporate some patterning in the brick. We've done that successfully in Williamstown and very minorly in South Hadley. But getting some different textures in there and creating some kind of pattern on that wall to give it a little bit more
Secret
interest.
messages or something.
Solid Granby.
Something a little more subtle than that, but yes, along those lines. So these are just some quick images that, just to give you a feel. Right now we're using the same color and texture, but you can see kind of the reddish brick, and then punctuated by the metal siding. The front entry will have quite a bit of glazing at the front for the doors, and then metal siding on there. And then brick at the administration wing, and then the darker brick behind at the gym. Gives a sense of it at least. Any thoughts or comments on that side?
So you think the dark brick would be a nice contrast to the existing brick as opposed to matching it?
I think especially to kind of juxtapose the gym mass against the administration and from the rest of the building, which kind of has a linear, low feel to it, would be nice.
Understanding seeing metal roof, have you thought about a color?
We've not.
You like purple?
Blue, actually, is our color.
In this rendering, that front part looks like a shed, it's fully built. Come out,
This part here.
yeah, and especially with that little canopy thing that we have.
With the covered entry.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Start to get this session.
Yeah, great.
You gonna come back to this later?
The
Someday?
massing and materials and all of that. Sure.
Any other comments on this later?
Sure. Right now, we want to get the cost basis, but certainly we'll come back and we'll, if we, developing this pattern and if we're going with brick, picking the exact specific colors that are going to go in the specifications.
I think everybody needs to digest these brick colors. I really do. I think just, it looks nice here, but I think we should digest this and talk about it again.
Great. Sure.
Granby's a red brick color. And to come into town and say we're putting, we gotta just make sure this passes the town meeting.
Yeah. And we can bring much more detailed renderings that will give you a better sense of it.
We're gonna need another one.
Sure, but for our purposes, brick is the correct material? Okay, that's what we want to confirm with you tonight. That's great.
I think the other thing you're hearing, and Suzanne, I'll point it out again, I think you heard this last time. I myself, and I don't think I'm the only one, there's a lot of different roof lines here in a short space. And for me, and maybe you're bringing us along in where we see it bringing up, I'm not an architect, but there's a lot of roof lines that in a small space, and I'm not sure what is the most attractive. Am I the only one that feels that way?
We talked about this the last meeting from a maintaining standpoint of snow and stuff. Certainly this walk in the front with that shed roof coming down there, if it has a metal roof on it, there's going to be avalanching snow down there, which we must address. There's going to be avalanching snow coming off the gym on the backside, which isn't too bad, because there's not as much out there at this front entrance. We've got a lot of roofs coming together that snow melts, leaks in. I think we're going to really digest this. I think it's a wonderful design, but we've got to digest it. And in fact, we'll let everybody at the town meeting stand up and say, I love it, here's my tax increase.
I think it's important also to get
that looks like. I mean, there's, the metal panels can look very attractive and they can look very industrial. And I'm not sure which way to go with it. We have to see a sample of it. But
Site plan. We have a board over here, and I'm sorry that it printed out a little bit light, but Berkshire Design Group has been working on the site plan extensively over the last few weeks, and just wanted to bring in an update on that. For the most part, the layout is what you've seen before, with the parent drop-off and visitor parking here off the existing curb cut, kind of isolated, so it's separate from the bus drop-off. We talked to the bus company on Wednesday. There was discussion that they were comfortable pulling off here and having a cobblestone strip or some kind of demarcation, but that's a bus lane only, and that cars then can pass to the left side of those buses. But their stop signs would still come out because they're mandated to by the state, but that with some training, we could still have cars passing. It's also not that likely that very many cars would be passing because high school is already in session, parent drop-off is over here, and really this lot is being used for staff parking for the most part. I mentioned earlier about the well and bringing power out to it and the pipeline. We found out that basically the well water right now is treated at a little shed here and distributed to the site from there, to both the high school and to East Meadow. The well field right now is currently out here in this area of the site. So at first we were thinking that we were bringing our new well feed through the center of the site, but because this is our point of distribution, we don't want to redo all of those distribution lines. Excuse me, especially to the high school. So our new plan is to bring the well connection down on this western side of the site and bring it into the existing distribution point, and then from there we can rely on the existing pipe to distribute it to both the junior senior high school and to East Meadow. We're talking about an oil tank and a propane tank that would be underground here. We have I forget the exact terminology, a hazardous materials tank here in case there's any leaks in the boiler room. And that's a requirement from DEP. We have our transformer out here. Right now we're thinking about a fenced-in area where a generator might fit right there, and as part of that sizing of the generator is also on the physical size of it, so making sure that we can accommodate that in that fenced-in area right there. We have a new grease trap here on the site coming out from the kitchen, and then continuing from there onto the existing septic system. Right about here is where we're proposing our fire tanks and our new fire pump shed, and then of course that would feed the building from there. So that's kind of the site utility portion of it. In terms of the playground area, so we have our parking over here. Dumpsters, I didn't mention, are right here, a little bit further from the kitchen, which we were fighting, but very easy for trucks to access. The maintenance department seems to be pretty understanding of that. So we have a new fire lane that comes across here. We attempted to have play areas around the school, but to keep kind of a lawn buffer between the classrooms and the play area. And in a way, this fire lane kind of helps formalize that in a way that it's not right now. So I think that might help with some of those conflicts. We have a new 8-foot wide concrete sidewalk here. Again, that was for ambulance and small truck access. And then this is a play area that we, Berkshire Design Group, would like to work more with the school district on exactly what happens in that play area, but it's certainly the one that's going to be focused on the pre-K through second grade, younger levels, so that the kids in that pre-K through second grades come out this door and their play area is right, located right there. We have a covered play area with some more hardscape up kind of at the convergence of these two play areas. And then what Berkshire Design Group, oh, here we've got basketball courts, which would also serve as overflow parking that could be accessed from that fire lane. What Berkshire Design Group is proposing here, and what they've done successfully in a few other projects, is using some of the earthwork, some of the excavation that's going to happen for the addition, and using that excavation to help bring students up. That basically, they were finding that they were spending $200,000 to $300,000 for playground equipment, most of which involves stairs and platforms to get up to the slide that then cost a fraction of that amount. So what they're proposing is a berm where you would start at grade here and move up on an accessible path, a nice wide accessible path, up to a height of maximum height of 6 feet, and then back down to grade on this side. And then off of that path, you have slides and marble runs and climbing nets and swing sets, and so that you kind of have, and then you have the berm itself, which can become part of the play experience as well. And so that with that raised berm, you're also kind of separating the playground area from the playing fields that are to the north of there. This is just cut off, but the existing baseball diamond is just to the north here, so we're not disrupting that, but giving a nice play area for the 3rd through 6th grade. Any questions on that?
That's a nice idea. Yeah. Excuse me, but I have to be, sorry. In the courtyard, we talked about that not being long.
We did.
We did.
That might be a typo, because they were under that understanding as well, that this would be mostly hardscape here with potentially some planters, and that this one would be lawn and a couple trees if we can make it work.
Are we still talking about the playground surface? We talked about
The rubber.
the handicap. I forgot what it was called.
Well,
What do you call it?
Yeah, universal access. This berm would facilitate that without the use of the double wide ramps and all of that kind of stuff.
Right. So certainly we'd still want to plan for that with our swing sets, that have a couple swings that are fully accessible that way. But as Judy was saying, that this accessible pathway kind of helps.
The thing would be though, if you were wheelchair bound, is how kids would transfer from the berm to the slide, and to a slide or to access in the equipment.
Right.
Getting that transfer notion in here.
And we
Let's
work.
be careful, get them all the way up and then do
Right.
anything.
Right. Yeah, they've specified that bars with concrete steps before that.
Last question, choppers up on a wheelchair to a slide.
Well, most of those kinds of kids, there are paraprofessionals out with them anyway, because of the extra assistance that required. Not to have a one-on-one. So the para would obviously push the wheelchair down, but at least he did a job of sensing their parents. Get up there on the wheelchair, get transferred, and actually have the flow of the slide.
There would be children that could basically operate.
No. I mean, there might be in some instances where they might, but in the most part, we have para support for those kids. Anyway.
With a scheme like this, one question we had was how much fencing around the site are we going to want to include for planning purposes?
Both to the east along Maximilian Drive.
Right. Along Maximilian? Yeah, I think, well, there is some existing, correct? Well, that's the question, does the berm sort of naturally start to do that, at least to the north? If some of the younger geared age group players need to be fenced, those are just things that are helpful to know now to have it in place.
Yeah, I think we might think about something from a security remember as a kid, you know, you'd have a higher probability of something like that happening if a lot of kids on the playground and not so many adults. You would have like a 20-to-1 ratio in the classroom, you know,
So what do we do now?
watch like that.
But the difference here is we're now pushing kids to the side of the building.
Right.
That's when it drives for me. It feels like there should be some fence in there because that's the immediate access.
Yeah, so that.
Everything else is the same.
You sort of send the signal, you need to go inside to the school building, you know. These wouldn't necessarily fully prevent, but you might dissuade cause the rocks by the fence.
Is there an intention for the playground to be accessible in schools and sessions? In schools and playgrounds?
I would think so. And that bounce playground, we built it on these years constantly, and I drive by there, big one.
Great. So we'll show fencing along Maximilian for now, and then you guys have more input for the next few days.
Won't fencing be added?
Of course, we want to get into cost estimates. Because our, well,
Oh, it is, but your site,
Maybe
your site adds about 8%, so every time you add something to the site, you're going to end up.
Is this playground structure reimbursable?
Well, that's with all of the site.
It's part of your 8%. All your site, work is maxed at 8%. Once you go beyond that, they're not participating.
We will be well over 8%.
If you are well over 8%.
With the well and the fire pump tanks and the oil tank and the propane tank and the parking, we're going to be well over 8%.
So what's the alternative?
No fence. Don't put the fence in. I mean, it's not a good alternative, but I mean.
Right. I think it is one disadvantage of the site that by not having sewer and water and natural gas, that's eating up a lot of reserves.
When we talk about the cost, we talk about your reimbursement rate being, I think it was 62-point-something%, but then we said your realistic reimbursement rate after all the things that they will not participate in is going to be somewhere in the 50, maybe 53% bracket. So those are the budgets that we're carrying for the district portion of the cost of the project. So I think we get it in now and then make determinations later. But let's not leave it out at this stage.
Speaking of reimbursement, just one final thing. Someone reminded me, we were planning on having our flat roof portion that's above here and all of our south-facing roofs on this part to make sure that they are PV ready, that they're engineered for, it's not very much, but the minimal weight of PV panels, and that we include the conduit runs now so that Granby could at a future date install PV panels on that roof. Is that something that sounds like a reasonable?
Since we're a green community, we still get grants, I think, for that. So if we continue to get grants, we may decide to use them on the school.
Yeah. Great. PV is not reimbursed by the MSBA, so that's.
Yeah, because we talked about potentially heating hot water. PV. So whether or not the community needs something, it's not going to be reimbursable by.
Great. Great. It's a long night. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you.
All right, looks really good. Any other reports?
Yeah, so a couple quick updates. So good news, Andrea did did record her public service announcement. I have not seen it. I've looked a couple times, but I don't know if anyone had a chance to see it. Tricia, do you know, has it been? It's been, okay, good.
Of course, it's going. It's been airing after meetings.
Oh, great. Okay, good. So that's number one. Number two, we had 3 open houses. Jim Morrissey spoke, I believe it was on the 9th at West Street, and handed out flyers. There are some nice flyers that you guys helped us out with, so thank you very much. And we do have copies for those of you who haven't seen the final version, but those were handed out. And he spoke for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes at West Street. East Meadow, I'm sorry. Andrea did West Street the following night, and I was able to do the high school on the 16th. So we were able to, and I had a good turnout. I had about 200 people at the high school. I don't know what the turnout was. Great.
Very receptive.
Good. And I think the PDF, Judy, was sent to you today, and we're hoping that maybe you can post it on the school website just as another way of making that information available.
Yeah, I'll put it up in probably in both families or also in the digital background one way or the other. Because a lot of the information that's on it is already on the web page for the school building project. There's a couple of extra bullet points. I've got navigation on the left-hand side on the school building page. It's just why the new building project, and there's a couple of extra bullets that I'll add to that document and re-upload that. So.
Great, thank you.
But the floor plan and the site plan, that's like a little slideshow on that page.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Yeah, all that's, we have a couple upcoming items that we're gearing up for. And I think Jim Petrus, is Jim here still? Yep. We're going to have you present to the music parents whenever they next meet, and also the Lions Club. And again, hand out the flyers and just give them an update. And then we talked about doing an event, I believe on the 4th at Council on Aging. And I forget who was going to cover that. I didn't write it down. It's in the minutes. Jim?
What are you doing, Council?
Is it the 5th?
Yeah.
Okay. It's in the notes. I didn't write it down here. So all that's taking place. And then we're still trying to finalize this idea of a town leadership meeting on the 28th of October. We're trying to hone in on that, and that would be an opportunity to invite the town leaders and update them with much of the same information. So that's sort of the update I had on outreach at this point. Oh, and I'm sorry, the flyer. We agreed that in the month of October we would try and finalize the trifold flyer so that we can gear up for getting that in the mail in early November. We want to send that to all town residents. So I don't know where we are with that. I know there was a good version of it, but I think the
version is kind of on hold because we want to be able to put more better cost in there.
Right.
So we're on hold until we can finalize that. That won't be till the 1st of December.
Well, we'll have the schematic estimate back for our next meeting on the 22nd.
Yeah, I thought we wanted to get the MSBA approval to put on there that they approve this amount of money.
They won't, you won't have a reading on the board of directors from MSBA until January 27th. That's when they're going to tell you.
Whatever best number we have to put this together.
Right, we're going to be submitting to them budgets, and they typically don't change those budgets. So what we get is schematic design in that budget without any refinements will be what we'll be pretty much putting into a schematic submission.
As long as we can get it done. We established that.
Okay, so our next meeting is October 22nd, and we are going to have
reconcile the process at that point in time of this design.
So can I assume that whatever information we're going to get from you guys, that we can try and put that into a flyer?
Yeah, if that information is good that night, we'll put it into the flyer within the next week, so we'll be ready to go.
Okay.
But I don't know when to get them that way, because it's a moving target right to then.
In the flyer, we want to include information on tax implications, because then if it's taking the number that we get from that October 22nd meeting and getting the town financial info on how that's going to affect tax rates.
So
an estimate on that.
Yeah, my recollection was we had hoped to have updated drawings and updated financials on what the impact was going to be. And we were going to try and put together some estimates, have all of that in a flyer that we were going to hopefully get out before Thanksgiving. That was my recollection. Does that seem to? And is that doable? Now, the numbers may be off a little bit, but they may be close enough for government work in terms of where we are. And we can probably put a notation that says more concrete estimates will be available as we get closer to January. I don't know, but I'm afraid if we wait until December, it's going to get lost, so.
You'll know at our next meeting what the estimate is of this and what the district's portion of this is. What I don't have a handle on is what your bond rating is and you know, what percentage you're getting, because that's all over the same thing on the bond project. So that's something that's like my
Double A plus, all right? Double A for our bond rating. We have a good bond.
Is it a 20-year bond? Is it a 30-year bond?
Yeah.
What are you having? How many are you?
I just know we have a good bond rating for the points.
Yeah, I think Chris Martin helped us with some of those early numbers with past experience. But we'll have all the numbers to tell you what your district's portion is.
So let's agree that at next meeting, we would talk about the flyer and what information we're going to put in, and is it possible to pull it off in an email for November. The next public service announcement, I think Jim Morrissey, you're going to make arrangements with Tricia to do it. Great. And then,
Basically, all the things I've done before with a couple of these things here.
yeah, you may have some renderings that we can provide.
Yeah, I could just have that poster that's all I need.
Same one?
If I could just take that with me.
Sure.
Just okay, so, no, just that one. I don't want to come like putting in rooms right out there on them. Too confusing.
Okay. So that's the update.
Okay, next meeting date.
October 22nd.
October 22nd.
Okay, so that's
And location will be back here?
Yep.
we can change the details. Anyway, I can even. But I thought it was good. Now we'll just use Yes.
6:30 here.
Yes.
Well, the reason that was that senior center was because it was hot and it was air conditioning right here. And so then they said, okay, by September's meeting, it should be fine. So that's exactly, that was our decision. Chris, I think the district's decision.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
this setup isn't really great for this meeting, because we can't hear a word you're saying down there, and I'm sure you guys can't hear us,
Yeah.
because it's a big long table.
I agree.
Can we either put it back at the senior center, so we have a table?
You guys want to do it at the senior center instead? Yep.
Yeah, or it's,
Or else set
okay,
these
so,
tables up.
figure out a better way.
Well, we have to stack them, but then even then, I think this.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think,
Senior
I
center-
don't think it is a meeting.
I don't think so, because
I don't
we're
think
getting,
it's-
right,
I don't even know if it's still be available.
All right.
senior center.
10 West State Street. I'll contact Chris and Heather. Yeah, actually, hopefully it's available, let's put it that way.
So do you have a motion to adjourn?
That'd be great with me.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Weirdos? Okay.